I stood across the street, heart pounding, heels sinking into the sidewalk. The red carpet sparkled under the flashes. Celebrities laughed and posed at his big night, our dream. And yet, I wasn't on the guest list. Jordan's voice echoed in my head. "You'll embarrass me?" That stung worse than any betrayal. I had built this with him, funded every brick, sacrificed me for him. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone. I stared at one name, one number I'd saved for years. Leo Martinez. I whispered, "It's time," and pressed call, igniting a storm Jordan never saw coming. Before we dive into Danielle's jaw-dropping journey from betrayed wife to business powerhouse, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more real-life-inspired drama, betrayal, and epic comebacks. Comment, "I'm here for Danielle," if you're ready to watch her rise. Smash that like button to support bold women reclaiming their power, one chapter at a time. 12 years ago, I walked into a rundown diner with my best friend Tanya and left with a broken omelet, burnt toast, and Jordan Brooks. He was a line cook, barely 24, with a nervous laugh and fire in his eyes. I remember how he leaned over our table and apologized for the food, saying, "One day I'll own a place where every plate is perfect." I believed him. Not because the food was good, it wasn't, but because his eyes didn't lie. They lit up when he spoke about flavors, textures, plating like art. He had big dreams. I had a big heart, maybe too big. I was fresh out of fashion school back then, ready to launch my own line. But dreams don't pay rent. I picked up a job at a boutique during the day, cleaned offices at night, and babysat on weekends. Jordan couldn't afford culinary school, so I helped cover his tuition. He promised to pay me back. I didn't care. I believed we were building something together. We moved into a tiny studio apartment above a noisy barber shop. It smelled like hair clippers and grease, but to us, it was magic. Our kitchen was barely big enough for one person, yet Jordan turned it into a test kitchen. He'd practice sauces until 2 a.m. while I hand-stitched clothing samples by the bedroom light. Every night I sat at the counter, tasting spoon after spoon of his attempts. "Too salty," I'd say. He'd frown. "Too bland." He'd groan. "Perfect," I'd whisper. He'd beam. That was our rhythm. There were nights we couldn't afford real groceries, so we lived on pasta and dollar store beans. Once, I pawned my sewing machine just so Jordan could buy imported truffle oil for a dish he was perfecting. He kissed my forehead and said, "One day, baby, this'll all be worth it." I clung to that dream like a life raft. He finally graduated, and we threw a tiny party with grocery store cupcakes and homemade lemonade. Then came his first real opportunity, working under a rising chef named Andre. That's when things started to shift, slowly, quietly. At first, I was proud. He came home talking about food trends, presentation, wine pairings. But soon he started using words I'd never heard before. Words like brand alignment and market fit. He stopped cooking at home, stopped asking me to taste things. One night, I showed him a small collection I'd been working on, designs I'd sketched during late nights while he was out. I was excited, nervous. He glanced at them and said, "It's nice, Danny, but don't you think it's time to focus on our future?" I bit my tongue. Our future had started to feel like his dream. He opened his first food truck a year later. I funded most of it, cashed out my savings, borrowed from Tanya, even sold a few of my early designs. When the truck became a hit, I cried tears of joy. I was so proud of him, of us. He said, "I couldn't have done this without you." And for a while, that felt true. But as the food truck grew into a small bistro, and then a second location, something in Jordan shifted. He started dressing different. Sleek suits, expensive watches. His phone never left his hand. He stopped calling me babe and started calling me Danny. He didn't come home for dinner anymore. Said he had meetings. There were always meetings. At one fundraiser event, he introduced me as his support system to a room full of investors, then turned away before I could respond. I remember staring at the back of his head, wondering when I became invisible. I told myself it was stress, that success was just changing the pace of things. But one night, I overheard him on the phone, laughing about how Danielle's great, but she doesn't really understand the fine dining world. He said it like I was some distant aunt, not the woman who gave up everything to put him where he stood. That night, I curled up in bed alone while he stayed out at another tasting event. The pillow still smelled like truffle oil. I started to ask myself if this was success, why did I feel like I'd lost? I stayed. Because that's what loyal wives do, right? I stayed through the bistro expansions, through the interviews, the influencer collaborations, through the rehearsed speeches where he thanked his incredible team, but never mentioned me. I told myself I was being petty. That recognition wasn't why I helped him. That love didn't need a spotlight. But deep down, something was breaking. Quietly. Like a thread pulled loose from a dress no one noticed unraveling. Until the day he looked me in the eyes and said, "You can't come to the grand opening." And when I asked why, he didn't flinch. "You'll embarrass me." That's when I realized I hadn't just lost him. I had lost myself. But not for long. After that night, the "you'll embarrass me" night, I stopped pretending. But the truth is, things had already been falling apart long before that. I just hadn't wanted to see it. Or maybe I did, and I was too afraid to admit it. Because admitting it meant admitting I'd built a life around a man who was no longer looking in my direction. It started with the friends, new people, loud people, people who talked too fast, smiled too wide, and sipped drinks I couldn't pronounce. Investors with gold cufflinks and women with surgically perfect faces. Jordan moved through them like he belonged, like he'd been born in champagne circles and velvet lounges. Andre, the celebrity chef who once mentored him, introduced him to these people. He called them tastemakers, said they could take Jordan's brand to the next level. That's when I stopped being Danielle, his wife. I became Danielle, the woman who didn't fit the brand. He never said that out loud, at least not at first. But the signs were everywhere. The dinners changed. He started hosting them in private lounges or rooftop patios lit by fire pits and chandeliers. At first, he told me, "It's just business, babe. These people don't want to talk about our life. They want strategy." Then he stopped telling me about the dinners altogether. I'd find out through tagged posts on Instagram. Everyone laughing around candlelit tables while I sat home reheating pasta. I asked him once why I wasn't invited. He looked up from his phone and said, "You wouldn't enjoy it. It's a different crowd." Different. That word hit me like a brick. He started dressing the part too. Tailored suits, designer watches, sleek shoes that cost more than our first rent check. He started using words like brand synergy and media optics. He even had a personal stylist. A stylist for a man who used to wear mustard-stained aprons and didn't care if his socks matched. I remember the first time I walked into his office and saw two young women sitting across from him with laptops. One of them looked me up and down, jeans, no makeup, hair in a bun, and gave me a quick, polite smile. The kind of smile you give a substitute teacher. Later, I asked Jordan who they were. "PR consultants," he said. "They're helping manage the brand now." "Our brand?" I asked. He hesitated. "Well, the restaurant brand." That's when it began, the silent division. His dream was no longer our dream. And I was a loose thread. They rebranded everything, logo, menus, even the social media pages. Danielle Brooks was erased from every About Us section. No mention of the woman who poured her savings, her energy, her love into it all. One day, I found a draft email on his laptop. He had accidentally left it open. It was from one of the PR consultants. "Danielle seems lovely, but she doesn't quite match the image we're building for Jordan's brand. For high-end events, we recommend solo appearances or carefully selected influencers." That was the moment I realized. They weren't just cutting me out of the narrative. They were scrubbing me clean from the picture altogether. Still, I stayed. I stayed because I thought if I kept showing up, kept loving him through it, maybe he'd remember who we were, who he was. But love can't compete with ego. And then came the night that finally broke me. He didn't know I was home early. I'd gone to Tanya's place after work, and she'd convinced me to come back and talk to Jordan, to give him another chance to see me. But as I walked up the stairs to our loft, I heard laughter. His voice, and someone else's. I paused by the office door, cracked open just enough. He was on speakerphone, laughing with someone I didn't recognize. They were talking about an upcoming gala. "I'm not bringing Danny," Jordan said, chuckling. "She doesn't get the upscale scene. She'd probably wear jeans and scare off the sponsors." They laughed. I didn't. I stood there, numb. Not because of what he said, but because he said it so casually, so easily. Like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. I went to bed in silence that night, turned my back to him when he came in hours later, smelling like cologne I didn't recognize and wine I hadn't shared. I stared at the ceiling and thought about our first tiny apartment, about cold nights and warm dreams, about hand-stitched clothes and burned risotto, about the version of us that used to be real. And that was when I started to realize the man lying beside me wasn't the one I fell in love with, and maybe he never would be again. 12 years of marriage. I wanted to market with something simple, honest. Just the two of us. No cameras, no investors, no velvet ropes. So I planned a dinner at home. I pulled out one of Jordan's old recipes, the one he used to make back in our shoebox apartment when we couldn't afford real meat. Creamy mushroom risotto with garlic herb butter. I even found the same cheap wine we used to drink from coffee mugs. I set the table with candles. Put on a dress I hadn't worn in years. One I designed back when I still believed in my own dreams. For a moment, I felt like myself again. But as the clock ticked past 7, then 8, then 9, I knew he wasn't coming. My phone buzzed at 9:14 p.m. "Jordan, can't make it tonight. Last-minute tasting with VIPs. Huge opportunity. We'll do something soon. Promise." Soon. That word had lost all meaning. I sat at the table alone. I didn't even cry. Just stared at the cold risotto and listened to the silence settle around me like fog. Tanya showed up the next morning, already mid-rant as she pushed open my door. "Girl, I wasn't going to say anything, but I saw him last night. He was at that rooftop place. Yeah, but not alone. He was sitting real close to that new PR chick, Jessica, or whatever her name is. Hand on her back. Laughing like they were on a date." I waved her off. He said it was business. Tanya crossed her arms. "Danny, I know you love him, but open your eyes. He stopped choosing you a long time ago." I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. So I cleaned up the untouched dinner, threw away the melted candles, and pretended everything was fine. But later that afternoon, I was doing laundry when I reached into the pocket of his jeans and pulled out a folded receipt. One of those fancy hotel printouts with gold trim. 1 room, 1 night, 2 dinners, 2 glasses of wine. From the same night he skipped our anniversary. At first, I stood frozen in the hallway, just staring at it like it might disappear if I blinked hard enough. Then I walked straight to his home office and waited. He came in an hour later, whistling, phone to his ear, dressed in one of those overpriced blazers he never used to care about. When he saw me holding the receipt, his smile faltered. For a second, I thought I saw guilt flicker across his face, but it vanished just as fast. He ended his call and tossed his phone on the desk. "Why are you going through my stuff?" "I was doing laundry." He shrugged. "It's not what you think." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was insulting. "You think I'm stupid?" He sighed, not guilty, not sorry, annoyed. "Danny, don't start. You know how important that night was for my career." I held up the receipt. "You took her to a hotel." He didn't deny it, didn't even flinch, just stared at me with that same cold, polished look I'd seen him give reporters when they asked personal questions. "You're being paranoid," he said flatly. "Don't ruin what I've built with your jealousy." What I've built, not we, not us. I don't remember what I said next. Maybe nothing. maybe too much. But I do remember how I felt, like the ground under me had shifted, like everything I'd spent 12 years building was a house of mirrors. That night, I packed a small bag. I didn't say where I was going. He didn't ask. That told me everything. I drove for hours without a plan, just needing to breathe, to think without the noise of his excuses. I ended up at a coastal town we used to visit before money and titles changed everything. The ocean hadn't changed. The breeze still smelled like salt and memory. I booked a room at a quiet inn and watched the waves crash for what felt like hours. My phone buzzed with messages from Tanya, not Jordan. Of course not Jordan. I lay in bed that night, the hotel receipt still in my purse like a rotten fruit I couldn't throw away. I thought about everything I'd given up, my dreams, my voice, myself. And for what? For a man who called my loyalty jealousy. Somewhere around 3 a.m., I opened my wallet and pulled out an old faded card. One I'd kept hidden for years. It had only a name and a number. Leo Martinez. Once upon a time, I helped him when no one else would. And before he left, he looked me in the eyes and said, "You ever need anything, call me. Just once. I'll pick up." I stared at that number, thumb hovering over the screen. I didn't call him, not yet. But for the first time in years, I thought about what it would mean to stop waiting for someone to save me and start saving myself. The beach town hadn't changed. Same cracked sidewalks lined with pastel cottages. Same sleepy coffee shop with mismatched chairs and cinnamon scones that crumbled just right. The waves still rolled in soft and steady, whispering secrets to the sand. It was the only place I ever felt like the world paused long enough to breathe. I hadn't been back since I met Leo Martinez. Back then, he wasn't a billionaire media mogul or a headline magnate. He was just a man running for his life, haunted, hunted, hiding. I never knew the full story, just that he showed up late one night, bleeding from a gash in his side, asking for a room and begging me not to call anyone. I was working part-time at a rundown inn that barely had running water. I should have called the police, should have turned him away. But something in his eyes, fear mixed with a strange kind of calm, made me pause. So I cleaned his wound, let him stay, asked no questions. For a week, he lived like a ghost in room 7, only leaving at night, always wrapped in a hoodie in silence. But one evening, I brought him soup and sat down across from him. He finally spoke. "I used to own everything," he said. "Money, power, respect. One leak, one lie. And now I'm poison." I didn't know what to say. I just listened. Maybe that's why he trusted me. Before he left, he pressed a business card into my palm. Black, smooth, and expensive feeling. His real name printed in silver letters. Leo Martinez. "If the day ever comes when you need something, anything, call this number," he said. "No questions. I owe you my life." I'd tucked the card into my wallet, never imagining I'd use it. Until now. It had been 2 weeks since the hotel receipt, since Jordan gaslit me into silence, since I walked out with my heart in pieces and found him flaunting his betrayal all over social media, arm draped around the PR rep, smiling like he'd won something. He was building a brand, all right. And I was the story he erased to make room for his spotlight. But no more. I sat on a sun-bleached bench facing the sea, Leo's card clutched in my hand. My thumb hovered over the screen as I typed the number into my phone. My heart pounded. What would I even say? "Hey, remember me? The girl who once bandaged your ribs and brought you tomato soup in paper bowls? My husband cheated and erased me from the life I helped him build. Can you fix that?" Stupid. Desperate. But before I could change my mind, I hit call. It rang twice. Then, a deep voice answered. "This is Leo." I opened my mouth and nothing came out at first. Then I whispered, "It's Danielle, from Oceanside Inn." There was a pause, then a low laugh. "Danielle Brooks. Wow, I wondered if you'd ever call." I blinked. "You remember?" Hard to forget the woman who stitched me up and asked for nothing. Silence stretched between us. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I think I'm ready to cash in that favor. His voice dropped to something serious. Say the word. I told him the story. Not every detail, just enough. About the husband who used my love as a ladder. About the restaurant I helped build but was now banned from. About the betrayal and the coldness. About being scrubbed from the picture like I was never part of it. He didn't interrupt, just listened. When I finished, he said, "Send me everything. Emails, contracts, old receipts, whatever you have. I'll take care of the rest." I hesitated. This isn't about revenge. I'm not trying to destroy him. I know, Leo said calmly, but some people only learn when they lose what they took for granted. We hung up, and for the first time in months, my chest didn't feel so tight. The wind shifted warmer somehow. I didn't know what Leo was planning, or how far he'd go, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. Not for Jordan, not for anyone. I gave him my heart, my years, my money, my trust. Now I was taking me back, and he was about to find out. Some women don't need a spotlight. We bring our own fire. The street buzzed like a hive. Cameras flashed nonstop. Influencers in designer gowns posed with glasses of champagne they didn't drink. A string quartet played softly near the entrance, while uniformed staff escorted VIPs down a deep red carpet rolled just for tonight. Jordan's flagship restaurant, his crown jewel, gleamed under spotlights, tall and towering, wrapped in banners with his name in gold letters. Jordan Brooks presents Ember. I watched from across the street. Engine off. Window cracked. My palms flat against my lap, trying not to wrinkle the dress Leo's team sent me. It was the same shade of rose gold I used to dream of sewing for my own fashion line. The fit was perfect, like armor disguised as elegance. I didn't want to be here, I didn't want to care. But there I was, watching, waiting. He hadn't changed, not really. Same confident walk, same wide grin, now just paired with a tuxedo that cost more than my first car. He posed with celebrities like he belonged. He laughed on cue, kissed cheeks, played the part. Not a single trace of the woman who stood beside him when his stove was a hot plate and our walls were peeling paint. And yet, here I was. The ghost he thought he erased. Then, just as the cameras started to settle, the black SUV pulled up. It didn't creep in quietly. It announced itself, doors opening in sync with the music's crescendo. An A-list actress stepped out first, dressed like she walked out of a magazine. The crowd lost it. Phones shot up. Paparazzi pushed forward. Then, Leo Martinez stepped out behind her. Not a smile, not a wave, just presence. He didn't need attention, he commanded it. People whispered his name like he was royalty. Jordan noticed the commotion. He tried to play it cool, nodding to the guests around him, but I saw it. The stiffened shoulders, the twitch in his jaw. He wasn't expecting Leo, and he definitely wasn't expecting what came next. Leo leaned over and said something to one of his aides. That aide walked briskly toward the entrance, stopping just in front of Jordan. I couldn't hear the words from where I sat, but I saw Jordan's eyebrows raise. He looked confused, then curious, then cautious. I could almost read his lips. "Leo wants a word?" The aide nodded and gestured toward the SUV. Jordan looked toward it, squinting. And then he saw me. I didn't hide. I didn't look away. I sat in the back seat of the SUV, windows down just enough for our eyes to lock. For one split second, the crowd around him faded. The lights, the cameras, the curated chaos, all disappeared. He saw me. The woman he once loved. The woman he abandoned. The woman who wasn't supposed to be here. His expression shifted from shock to dread. Leo turned then, casually, as if he hadn't just orchestrated the ultimate interruption. He stepped closer, his voice low but firm. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see Jordan's face pale with each one. Leo pointed back toward the SUV, toward me. Then I saw him say it. "Your wife sent me." Jordan flinched, like the words slapped him. Leo said something else, quieter this time. Jordan's jaw clenched. He ran a hand through his hair, then nodded stiffly. Cameras were still flashing. Guests were whispering. No one knew what was happening, but they knew enough to know something was. Jordan turned to the crowd, faked a laugh, and disappeared inside the restaurant with Leo by his side. I leaned back in my seat, finally exhaling. I didn't need to walk that carpet. I didn't need to pose for pictures or smile for the press. I didn't even need to speak. Because my message was already loud and clear. You don't erase a woman like me without consequences. You don't build an empire on my sacrifices, and then lock me out of the gates, not without hearing the knock on the door. And tonight, that knock came from Leo Martinez, the man I saved, the man I called, the man who came. And Jordan? He was about to find out. The real power wasn't in the spotlight. It was in the shadow of the woman who made it all possible. The moment Leo stepped into the restaurant with Jordan trailing behind him, a ripple went through the crowd. Guests leaned in. Staff paused mid-step. Even the waiters, trained to move like shadows, slowed. Leo didn't belong to anyone's schedule, not tonight. He moved like he owned the building. In a way, he did. I waited just outside in the hallway, hidden by a velvet partition, my hand gently resting on the fabric of my dress, my design. I hadn't worn anything from my old collection in years, but tonight felt right. It wasn't just a dress, it was a declaration. Inside, Leo and Jordan disappeared into a private lounge. Security posted up outside. A few VIPs tried to follow, but Leo's assistant blocked them with a smooth, "They need a moment." A moment that would change everything. I didn't see what happened inside that room, but I knew what Leo was telling him, because it was the truth I'd buried in a drawer for years, hoping I'd never need it. 12 years ago, when we started building the foundation of Jordan's dream, I paid for most of it. The loans, the food truck, the permits, the branding. And back then, on Tanya's advice, I made Jordan sign partnership papers. Just in case, she'd said. Jordan didn't even read them. He trusted me. Or maybe he never imagined a world where I'd need leverage. Those papers gave me 51% of everything tied to our original business entity, the one that all his future restaurants were legally built on. I'd never used it, never even mentioned it, until Leo asked for every document I had. And now, the truth was out. The doors to the lounge opened. Jordan stepped out first, pale and sweating despite the crisp air conditioning. His smile was forced, tight. Leo followed, calm and collected. He adjusted his cufflinks and said something into his phone. 2 minutes later, a small team from City Beat, one of Leo's media outlets, walked in, cameras rolling. That was my cue. I stepped in slowly. The crowd parted like water. Gasps, whispers, flashbulbs. My heels echoed with purpose on the marble floor. Heads turned, eyes widened. Even the servers paused. And there he was, Jordan, staring at me like he'd seen a ghost. I stopped right in front of him. Let him look at the dress. Let him remember the woman he once encouraged to give up her dreams for his. A reporter stepped forward. "Excuse me, are you Danielle Brooks, Jordan's wife?" I smiled. Not too wide, not too soft. "I'm not just the wife," I said. "I'm the reason this exists." The cameras clicked. Someone gasped. Jordan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Leo stepped in. "You all should know. Mrs. Brooks isn't just a guest tonight. She owns 51% of the Brooks Dining Group, legally, permanently." Gasps turned to murmurs. Whispers turned to shock. I looked directly at Jordan. "You told me I'd embarrass you if I came tonight. But here's the truth. You were always embarrassed by how much you owed me." His face flushed red. "Danny, can we talk? In private?" I shook my head. "No more hiding. You built this empire on my back, and now the world knows it." Reporters fired questions all at once. How long have you owned the company? Did you invest in the flagship location too? Were you kept out on purpose? Jordan tried to speak again, but Leo raised a hand. Tonight's celebration is still happening, he said. But let's make one thing clear. Danielle Brooks will be treated as the partner she's always been. Starting now. The crowd applauded. Not for Jordan. For me. I stood there, head held high, the weight of years lifting off my shoulders. I didn't need revenge. I needed recognition. And I had it now. Not because someone gave it to me, but because I took it back. This was no longer Jordan's story. It was mine. And the best part? I was just getting started. I used to think power looked like a man in a suit behind a podium, surrounded by flashing lights and nodding heads. But tonight, I learned something different. Real power doesn't beg to be seen. It walks in, owns the room, and leaves with the doors wide open behind it. After the announcement about my 51% stake, the entire mood inside Ember shifted. The red carpet crowd wasn't buzzing about Jordan anymore. They were whispering my name now. Danielle Brooks. Some said it with shock, others with admiration. And then I gave them something more to talk about. I stepped onto the small stage near the bar, right under the massive sign with Jordan's name still glowing in gold above me. Funny how fitting it looked now, hanging over the woman who really built it. I held the mic steady. My hands weren't shaking this time. Thank you for being here tonight. I know most of you came to celebrate my husband's latest venture. But before dessert is served, I smiled slightly. I have a small announcement of my own. Silence fell. Eyes locked on me. I took a breath. This was the moment I'd waited over a decade for. Not to humiliate, not to destroy, but to reclaim. Starting next quarter, I'll be partnering with Leo Martinez to launch a new upscale restaurant brand. Under my own name. Gasps, applause. Mouths fell open like the champagne bottles being popped at the bar. I continued, calm and steady. This new venture will celebrate global flavors, creative women in the kitchen, and authentic stories behind every dish. For years, I stood in the shadows helping someone else build their dream. But now, it's time to build mine. Jordan's face looked like it had been carved from stone. And then Leo stepped forward, taking the mic. She's being modest, he said. Danielle won't just be launching a brand, she'll be the face of it. She's brilliant, strategic, and has a taste for more than just good food. She has vision. And I'm honored to invest in it. The applause came like a wave. Jordan stood stiffly off to the side, arms folded, eyes burning. I met his gaze, not with hate, but with finality. Later that evening, he tried to corner me in the office where we once used to dream together over spreadsheets and burnt coffee. Danielle, he said, voice low, you don't have to do this, not like this. I turned to face him, composed. This isn't revenge, Jordan. This is restoration. You're humiliating me. No, I said calmly. You did that when you told me I'd embarrass you. He exhaled sharply. So what now? You just take everything? I reached into my clutch and pulled out the buyout papers Leo's legal team had drawn up. No, Jordan. You get to keep what you created. You just won't be building on my foundation anymore. His eyes scanned the document. The numbers were fair, generous even, but his pride wouldn't let him see that. Still, he signed. The moment his pen hit the page, something shifted in the air. Like the weight I'd carried for 12 years finally released its grip. I walked out of that office feeling taller. As I stepped back into the main dining hall, the crowd erupted into applause. Not forced, not polite, real. And for once, the cameras were pointed at me. Not because I was someone's wife. Not because I was part of someone else's dream. But because I had finally claimed my own. Leo met me near the entrance, glass of sparkling cider in hand. He knew I didn't like champagne. He leaned in, his voice warm but amused. Told you that favor would come in handy. I laughed softly. You didn't just come through. You reminded me who I was. He tapped his glass gently against mine. Now don't forget it again. Outside, the flashes continued as reporters asked about my new restaurant line, potential cookbook, and what it felt like to step into the spotlight after so many years behind the curtain. I answered every question, not with bitterness, not with vengeance, but with confidence. Because this was the final course, and it was served with grace, strength, and everything I had once buried to keep a man's dream alive. Now, it was my turn to build. Enjoyed Danielle's comeback story? Then hit that subscribe button because we're just getting started. Comment below, what would you have done in Danielle's shoes? Don't forget to like, share, and turn on that notification bell so you never miss another story of revenge, resilience, and rising from the ashes. New episodes every week, where silence ends and power begins.